Our guest today is a Doctor of Neurology. She also holds a bachelor's degree in psychology and is a certified life coach and the author of the best-selling book, Cracking the Rich Code. Today we're going to explore the science of stress and music as medicine. Welcome, Dr. Shafer.
Thank you, Daniel, for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Well, I've been learning a lot offline in our conversation. You've got a golden retriever and a very important story to tell about mental health today. And as we learn about mental health and suicidality, my first thing that I want to understand is, out of all the things you could have done, how did you end up choosing neurology as your field of study?
Daniel, for me, it was not a straight path. There are people that I met in medical school that they were 14 or they were even 4 and they got their first doctor's kit and they said, that's what I'm going to do. That wasn't my path. For me, when I was little, I knew I was going to be a musician. And I was. I started professionally recording. I was even producing and writing, play piano, guitar, all of those things. Initially in jazz and then rhythm and blues in Indiana. So it's the middle of the Midwest, and a lot of people think, what's in Indiana? Well, at that time, actually, R&B was really big. There was a really wonderful culture and musical presence there. So I was really fortunate to be involved as a young person in that world. When I was 17, I graduated from school early. I really didn't care about school. I didn't care about science, none of that. I moved to New York City. I lived on couches. I sang in subways. I got recruited from singing in subways to then do house and dance music. I was really living a very different life. And then everything changed. I ended up pivoting my career because I moved back to the Midwest after getting married really too young and too fast. And I came back to the Midwest where I was from, and I thought, well, what am I going to do with my life? And someone suggested to me that I become a psychiatrist because of my studying psychology at that time and just the way that I interacted with the world. And that was a time in my life, I was quite young, I was quite impressionable, and I thought, okay, I'll do that. I'll prove, right? Here I've lost this career. I've left this career that was so important to me. I'd worked so hard for so long. I'm going to prove that I'm worth something now that I've given up everything I worked so hard for. And so I really threw myself into getting into a medical school. I applied to one medical school, which is not generally how that works. And in a year and a half of doing my prerequisites, prior to this having nothing to do with science or anything of that nature, I got into medical school. And once I went to medical school, I explored different specialties. I actually planned on going into dermatology, which is a very competitive field. For those who are listening who are doctors, they'll know. It's one of those, especially in the States, that you have to be the top few people in your class. So I worked really hard, really likely to the detriment of my mental health because I was just very focused on getting into that specialty. But then as a third-year medical student, that's when you start to spend time in the different fields, right? You can't just say, no, I'm going to be a neurologist or I'm going to be a dermatologist, so this is what I'm doing for 2 years, and then I go to my residency. No, you need to do rotations, as we call it. And so early on in my third year, which is really when you're starting to do the rotations, I did a neurology rotation and I fell in love. I fell in love with the disease processes. For me, I'm a very visual thinker and structural. And I like to think in the logistics of how things work together, right? I really loved organic chemistry. I don't know if anyone listening remembers when you learned about organic chemistry and how things worked and the cascade of events. Neurology was like that for me. And it all made such good sense. And I loved the patients. These were people who often had conditions for which there was no cure. They weren't going to the doctor to get a Z-Pak for an infection that was going to be gone in a week or two. Mm-hmm. These were people that had to work with their doctor to navigate their illness, not necessarily overcome or cure it. And they were the most resilient, inspiring people I'd ever met. And I just wanted to spend more time in the clinic working with them, helping them and hearing their stories. And so that really set me off onto the path of becoming a neurologist. And I've loved getting to know the patients in this specialty as well as the challenges that they're facing ever since.
The patients and the challenges that they have, what does that look like? Because a lot of people sometimes have a feeling that there's something wrong, but they find it hard to calibrate. Is this normal? I'm always living in this body. I don't know what it's like to live in somebody else's body. What is it for them?
Yeah, I love how you phrased that because there are really obvious things like my head hurts, right? That's really obvious. But then there are also some really strange things that, especially in neurological disorders, that can't be seen, that can be happening. And they can either happen acutely, which means right now, or they can be happening chronically over a period of more than 3 months and accruing or building up over time, right? So when we think about the person who's having worse and worse balance issues, right? Because maybe they have a central nervous system problem, or which means in the brain, or maybe they have a peripheral nervous system problem. Maybe they have undiagnosed diabetes and it's causing numbness in their feet and that's affecting their balance. There are so many things that can cause one symptom or a collection of symptoms. And that's where, from a diagnostician standpoint, it's really interesting to be a part of trying to get those answers. But also, I think there's something really unique about you can't always fix that problem, right? So if someone has numbness from diabetes, we found out we have diabetes. The frustrating part can be that we can't necessarily make that numbness that we have go away, but we can try to get a hold of the challenges once we've named them so that we can keep them from getting worse. But something that I experienced working with patients on things like multiple sclerosis, their headaches, recovering from a stroke, their diabetic neuropathy, all of these things, their seizures. The thing that kept on coming up was there is a collection of people, and it's not a small number, that you can do everything right for them as a physician, and the outcome isn't what you want or expect for them. And it's frustrating for them. It's frustrating for you, right? You don't want to let your patients down. And after going through things in my life and really taking a step back and recognizing all of the warning signs my body was sending me and the cascade of effects it was having on my health and my life and my wellness, it gave me so much insight into the fact that we as physicians, we need to do a better job, and systems, medical health care systems, need to do a better job at giving patients opportunities to talk about something other than the numbness and not have mental health and what they're experiencing in their home. Are they truly safe? Are they able to really embody their autonomy and have choices in their life and their healthcare? So many people looking back who are coming in and they weren't getting better, weren't not getting better because I was prescribing the wrong medication or because they were eating the wrong food or they were failing or they were a term that is often used in medicine called non-compliant. Often it was something in their environment was not suiting them. They couldn't grow. They couldn't get out of fight or flight survival mode. And when you're in that mode and you're having that neurochemical response to those feelings and those triggers, that is damaging to your body, which is damaging to your health. And it is going to affect you and limit what a physician who's doing everything they can to help you can do to really help improve the quality of your life. Because when we go to see the doctor and they're doing their check boxes and they're working on the metrics of, okay, you had this percent less headaches this month or this percent less seizures. That's an important marker and it's a data point we can follow. But for you as a patient, that's not really what you're looking for, right? You're looking for an improvement in your quality of life. So I really changed the focus of my work to what are the ways that I can spotlight this
Mm,
and help others put as much energy into reclaiming their autonomy
mm,
and taking their mental health seriously and taking their environment seriously, right? What am I putting in? Because what I put in is going to affect what comes out for
mm,
me so that we could really get people living happier, healthier lives.
mm. The Journal of American Medicine Association reported years ago that 60 to 70% of outpatient visits to the hospital were to do with sleep, stress, and anxiety. And when the patients were going to the hospital wasn't geared up to deal with those three problems. And the sad part of that report, they said that about 95% of those people didn't get any help. And it's one thing to look at the body, and it's another thing to look at the environment. And those mental health challenges, those physical health challenges, it's hard to figure out where the root is coming from. One thing I learned in studying emotional intelligence is that people can suppress and repress negative emotions. And Sigmund Freud said repressed emotions never die. They come out in uglier ways. And when they go to the hospital, it might not be something physical, but that emotional pain has become physical in the body. And I went through it. It would have been a decade ago. I was living here in Taiwan. I just resigned from my job. My wife had been through 2.5 years of rehabilitation because she had an accident on an aircraft. I had my first daughter, and we almost lost her 3 times. So we had this big chunk of stress for a long time, but to get on with life, we were like, we can't deal with that shit right now. We've got to compartmentalize it. And so I got to Taiwan, I settled in, started a business. Business didn't work out. And then I started to develop breathing problems. And I said to my wife after a couple of weeks, I said, I can't breathe. I feel like I'm going to choke. And she said, what's wrong? I said, I don't know, but take me to the hospital. Went down to the hospital, went in. I was one of those 60 to 70% of people. And the doctor checked my blood pressure, sent me for an x-ray, sat me down. He said, Mr. Tolson, there's nothing wrong with you physically. It's all in your head. And I said, thanks, Doc. What do I do? And he sent me to the psychologist. So I was one of those people, that 5% who actually got the help that was required. But it was very hard because I couldn't pinpoint exactly where the source of the stress was. It wasn't anything that was happening today specifically, but it was that build-up that you're mentioning over time. And as humans, I think we, from what we say in NLP is we delete things. It's like when we spray cologne or perfume on in the morning. A couple of hours later, it doesn't matter how expensive it was, we've deleted that smell out of our mind. Okay, I've put it on, I know it's there, but now it's out of our mind. And if we keep repressing those things, we forget them. But that uglier way eventually comes out. What were the events for you, and what were the uglier ways that the body responded to what you were going through in your stressful times?
Yeah. Well, I think, you've spoken with a lot of physicians and you also work in a high volume, high efficiency business environment. And you know that we are all the people who ignore those triggers that our
Tend to ignore
bodies
them.
are
I'll put it
sending
over there.
us, right? And we say we're going to deal with this later cuz I'm too busy. But the thing is, we've set up our lives to always be busy because we never want to face those. And they just, as you said, they compound over time. They're growing Just like we're growing and we're changing, they're growing and changing. And because we haven't actually taken them and looked at them, almost like a weed, right? There's a weed growing in your garden and you pluck it. You have to actually put your focus on it, grab it, pluck it, and say, you're a weed. And by the way, I may not have gotten all your roots. You may come back, but I see you. It's good to know you're here. I'm going to put you over here, and I'm going to keep an eye on that spot because I know I may have missed some. You've dealt with it. You've named it, claimed it, and reframed it is a catchy way that I like to talk about it because you take the power away from it. Because if you just ignore it and you say, oh, I'm going to plant roses in front of it, which is what we do with the perfume, the cologne that you mentioned, right? We're like, or we put our makeup on, we dress nicely, we get that degree, we start that business, we build this facade, and we say, okay, ignore that weed. It's not there, but it's still growing. And so for me, I was experiencing domestic violence and I had shame around that, just like we have shame around our mental health struggles, our chronic health problems, issues in our families, things that we have a trouble accepting within ourselves often. We build a facade to try to shield the world from that. We're protecting the world in a way that the world never asked us to do, right? Because most of us know when we actually learn how to ask for help, how to name that weed's there, that there's so many people in our lives that are just waiting to help us, to say, let me help you with that. I had a weed just like that. I know what to do. And by the way, if we really want to get to the root of the problem, we probably need to do some digging. And I know this way to prevent it from coming back, or I'm going to keep an eye out for when it comes back because now I know that it's there. Thank you so much for telling me. We have these people in our lives. And the thing that we're doing when we build that facade is we're preventing them from being able to help us because we're hiding. So not only are the weeds growing and we're hurting ourselves, we're not respecting the autonomy of others to make the choice of how they want to participate in our lives. That doesn't mean that everyone will show up the right way for you because we know when we start sharing our stories, that's not the case. There are going to be many people who often because of their own facade, they're not going to be able to reflect or mirror back at us what we're sharing because they're really committed to their own facade that's holding space in front of their own weeds that they're not ready to face, right? That's about them. That's not about us. But there are going to be people in our lives when we point out the things we're ashamed of or we point out our problems and our challenges that are just waiting to support us. And that's what happened to me. I was so afraid. And I felt the fear, not only that was a byproduct of my own nervous system, my own upbringing, the patterns that got me to where I was in that moment, as well as external pressures and external sources of fear. But in the moment where it felt like it was sink or swim, it really felt like this is kind of the end of the line. In that moment, I found some strength to ask for help. And I shared my story with my best friend, who I hadn't shared anything meaningful with in years because I think I'd lost the feeling that my story mattered, right? That was the message I received, and I had started to believe it. And I shared that story. And his response to me was a pause, showing up as a fantastic listener, which you and we talked about this off camera. That's an art that so many of us have lost, including doctors, right? We're there to teach and listen to me. I've got the answers. But so many of the answers lie within listening. And he said something so simple to me in that moment that felt like my lowest, and it felt really like the end. And he said, "Do you know that you matter?" And that statement rocked me. And it really set me on a trajectory of making small micro choices and forming new habits every day that would prove to myself that I did know that I mattered. I started exercising again. I started listening to a lot of really excellent podcasts with psychologists and people who are in similar situations as me, and medical podcasts to help me rebuild that sense of self and autonomy so that I could every day start making those choices. It was a light bulb moment, but the change in my life, it couldn't happen immediately. I had so much rebuilding and strengthening to do, but I began to understand that it mattered and that I was worth that investment. And so that really started me on this path of trying to help others have that light bulb moment and give them really small, digestible, actionable things that they can incorporate into their mindset, into their routines, so that they can start to rebuild those muscles and to really embrace their autonomy and the downstream effects that that will have on their health and on their wellness and their happiness.
You were mentioning domestic violence. When did you realize that the relationship was a relationship of domestic violence?
That's an excellent question. I don't know that I have a time. What started happening was for a really long time, and I think this has chronically been an issue for me, and I see it in so many other people who are the popular thing to say now is a people pleaser. So people who are rescuers, people would mistreat them and they would respond almost like, "Oh no, I'm sure you didn't mean to do that. I'm sure that came from a place of, your own traumas or whatever. Let me fix that." And so I had been so busy for so long stepping in trying to figure out what I had done wrong to incite this action or incite these consequences in my life that really I didn't have a concrete moment. But what started happening, and I think that this is very common for people in this situation, is you can't stay in fight or flight forever. You can't. You can't walk on eggshells forever. You get tired, your body, and when your body gets tired, it's kind of like if you're doing an exercise for a long time. If you're standing on your tiptoes because you're walking on eggshells for a long time, your muscles will start to send you signs of fatigue and strain. And eventually you will collapse because you can't keep going. My nervous system had, for probably about a year before that conversation, started to send me signs. And that's how long it takes. Your nervous system, your brain is the greediest organ in your body. It's taken at least a fifth to a quarter of your blood flow at all moments, and it prioritizes its needs over everything else. That's why we faint when we're not getting enough blood flow to the brain, because the brain says, "Hey, I'm going to give you a few warnings. I'm going to make your heart rate go up. I'm going to make your vision go like this, right? I'm going to make your vision tunnel. I'm going to make you feel hot and sweaty. I'm going to tell you I want you to get down. But by the way, if you don't get down in time, and I'm not going to give you that much time, I'm going to put you down." Why? Because what I need is the most important, because I am you. We have to stay alive. We have to protect ourselves. My nervous system had been sending me these trigger warnings, these signs for a really long time. I call that, when I work with people in the coaching sphere, your trigger detector. When your nervous system, when your gut, often many people feel it in their gut, when they feel that sensation of feeling unwell, of feeling sick to their stomach, of this doesn't feel right. What we were trained to do, and I know you're a man, so you don't necessarily have the same cultural experience that I, as a woman, would have, but women, I think especially, are trained to ignore those feelings and make excuses for them. We're kind of like, it's almost as if we have a metal detector. We're on the beach and it's beep, 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 beep. It's going off. And we are trained and conditioned to drop it and run the other way. That's what we're trained to do. And what I started to do, and that what I want other people to learn how to do, is when you hear that beep, 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 don't run away. That's your nervous system telling you, dig here, learn more about this and listen to it. Is this person unsafe? Get away from them, right? Do the things you need to do to make that change. And it doesn't have to be today.
Mm.
Sometimes that's not the safe choice for it to be today. But listen to and trust your body. Does this work environment not work for you? You mentioned a business that didn't work out. In that moment, that probably felt really horrible, but
Mm.
you wouldn't be where you are now if you hadn't accepted that and
Mm.
grown from it and taken those lessons. So instead of shaming ourselves and ignoring the cues that our incredible nervous system, that again, our nervous system wants us to thrive and stay alive. That's all it wants. So when it's sending us these cues, instead of shaming it and ignoring it, what happens when we learn how to listen to it and respond to it and move out of fight or flight, but become, like you said, a good listener, but not to other people, but actually listen to ourselves.
I was having a conversation with a lady who'd been in a domestic violence relationship. And one of the things that she noticed was that her head noise was very loud. So in the relationship, there was a lot of abusive words. It started with the words and the manipulation. And then because she'd been in that situation for such a long time, she'd replay those words over and over again in her head. And one of the ways that she learned to cope was to put a set of headphones on and blast the music at level 10. So it drowned out everything else. And that was her temporary coping mechanism. And then when she got in the car, she couldn't have the headphones on, so she'd crank up the sound system in the car as well. And for her, because she had seen domestic violence in the home, she had seen her friends experiencing worse, she tended to normalise her. Well, it's not as bad as Dad did to Mum, and it's definitely not as bad as my girlfriend's at the moment. And so for her, she really started to normalise that and at some level to accept it. Well, it's not as bad, so mine must be a little bit better. And I think it was just that, as you mentioned before, the survival mode. We can think, process, we're conscious beings, but the body's just designed to survive like any organism. What's the programming?
Yeah.
Don't die.
That's it. That's the
Stay
beginning
alive.
and end. That's the beginning and end.
And then we
Yeah.
get into personal development and we start to think about legacy and purpose, but the nervous system. Mental health, I was looking at some numbers today, mentalhealth.org UK. They said 74% of adults have felt overwhelmed by stress in the past year. 61% reported feeling anxious, and 46% said they ate too much or are unhealthy due to stress. When we get stressed, what's happening inside of the body? Because I can see what's happening out here, but I can't see what's happening in here. What's taking place in the body as we experience stress?
So the parts of our nervous system and our adrenal glands, et cetera, that are the parts of us, I love to give the example because it's, I think, crystal clear in our mind. We have the same nervous systems that we had when we were quote unquote cavemen. And we would leave our cave. And if there was
I think I smelt that BO in the lift today. The
we'd
caveman.
leave our right. It's still there. And by the way, if it was really a really bad smell, it makes you think, how stressed is that person? You know what I mean? How stressed is that person? Because there have been studies that talk about, the different odors of, body odors when someone's under stress and when they're just simply exercising. And it's different. It's different. So that's really interesting too, to go on a little aside. But when we think back to our days as cavemen and cavewomen, and we leave the cave and we saw a saber-toothed tiger, or we even heard something off in the grass, right? It would set off our neuroaxis to go into that fight, flight, fawn, right? Those are the things that we're going to do. And back then, fight or flight, that was really usually the choice we were making. Fawning is something newer that I think is more of something that goes along with, unfortunately, some patriarchal issues. Women have had to learn how to fawn to survive,
Mm.
right? A
Mm.
lot of domestic violence isn't physicality. A lot of it is coercive control. And often the survival response to that is fawning.
Mm.
But in the caveman days, because we weren't involved in that level of the social aspect, it was more of a survival, true survival. We had to respond as fight or flight. What's the thing that's going to be more likely to help me survive in
Mm.
this moment when I sense there's a saber-toothed tiger or I see it? Because our nervous systems have not changed that much over the years, we still have that same response. And so if you can think back to a time when your nervous system was triggered into a fight or flight response, let's say, often for people, they can think of driving if they drive a car, right? And something unexpected and potentially dangerous happened. And all of a sudden you are flooded with this
Mm.
neurochemical response. Your heart rate changes, your breathing changes, your vision becomes crystal clear. You feel like almost superhuman in some ways. Your response time is really quick because, again, your nervous system says, okay, all the blood flow to the brain, make this decision, and then blood flow also rest and digest. When we're in that different phase, that's when we do our things like resting and digesting, right? We have blood flow that's going to our gut and it's digesting our food. When we're in a fight or flight situation, that's not where the blood flow is going. It's going to our legs so we can run. It's going to our brain so that our
Mm.
vision is clear and our hearing is impeccable, all of those things. Our brains don't know and our nervous systems don't know the difference between the saber-toothed tiger and the person in your life that sends you signals through coercive control and past experiences. Maybe it was just one time that they made you feel unsafe. Our nervous system is going to continue sending us that message. This isn't safe. This isn't safe. This
Mm.
isn't safe. When we got away from the saber-toothed tiger, we didn't take them home as a pet. We got away from them, right? Because survival was key. Well, now, because we've got these added layers and constraints of modern life, we often live with the saber-toothed tiger, or we go to work with the saber-toothed tiger, and we come up with all these reasons why we can't escape them.
Mm.
When if we just think really purely simply about survival and about this being our life and our health, we can. It's not necessarily going to be easy. It's not necessarily going to be risk-free. There may be consequences and challenges, and this may be not just a quick sprint away from this tiger, but it may have a lot of consequences to our lives. But so does keeping them in your orbit all the time, right? So does
Mm.
going to work in that toxic environment or in the career that is killing you slowly because it's not really meant for you.
Mm.
So I think it's just so important for us to understand we have the same nervous system we always did. And our nervous system doesn't need an extraordinary amount of extra money. It doesn't need an extraordinary amount of creature comforts. A lot of the things that we say, well, if I leave this situation, I'm going to lose XYZ. Your nervous system is going to keep on sending you those warning signs until you meet your basic needs, because without doing that, none of this matters. And I recently lost a friend to suicide just in the last few days. And for that individual who was going through very similar things to what I was going through years ago, he wasn't having those basic needs met. And so nothing made sense. And he felt so stuck. And he tragically ended his life. And I know this person so well. And I still am processing. This has been really, truly just a few days. He didn't want to end his life. He wanted to live. He wanted to be happy. And I so wish that I could go back and sit beside him and just, as we said earlier, just be a good listener and try to help him find that first step to getting there.
Mm.
And we live with these feelings of what would have happened if. And it's easy to get stuck there in our own lives and in these tragic moments. But when I think about him and his life, it just inspires me even more to focus on mental health and to help people understand that they don't need to feel shame when their body is telling them that these things are wrong. We just need to actually listen. Okay, what is your body telling you? What is it telling you? What are the signals it's sending you? And what do we need to change? Because we can't change you. You're not wrong. You're not broken. You're not bad. Your body is just telling you something needs to change. What do we need to change? And try to focus on that and let go of the shame. I wish so much I could have done that for him in his final moments.
When should we start educating our children to have those conversations? Because it's a reflection of something that's happened in the past. And I believe that somebody who takes their life, it's not that they lack courage. It takes a lot of courage to do that. But there's been something in the past where they haven't learned that skill to ask for help. I know in the Australian society, asking for help is a sign of weakness. And when people do ask, "G'day, mate, how you going?" it's more of a statement than a question. And for a lot of Aussie men, when somebody says, "How you going?" you know not to tell the truth because the response you're going to get. And it's confusing for a lot of men and for a lot of women. And they know that it's a statement, not a question. So when do we start to teach our children to ask for help rather than having learned helplessness? And how do we teach them how to listen to others? Because there's so many levels of listening. And it takes, as trained therapists, that's what we do. We've got to listen for what's beneath the surface. But for a lot of people, it's quite uncomfortable. What if they say something? Well, your job's not necessarily to fix them. You're not there to fix them. It's for them to talk. It's like in music. The music is heard in the silence. It's in the pause. That's most important. And if we could teach that skill at a younger age to listen and to let others feel heard, I think that'd be a big breakthrough. Where would we start?
Wow, that's such a meaty and important question. I have so many little bubbles of thoughts coming up. One is I hear you. I hear you saying people don't want to know. But look at someone like Taylor Swift, who has built a career on expressing her emotions. Look at the Tortured Poets Department, which is her album that was probably the most real, the most raw. And it was groundbreaking for her as an artist because of how real and raw and honest she was. It was much less sugar-coated. And it really resonated with people because they wanted to hear her. And I think they also so wanted to have the feeling that they could just essentially word vomit their feelings out into a song and have someone hear them, right? That's why so many people around the planet love her music because they're like, wow, how brave. And when we hold ourselves back from communicating that, despite knowing how that resonates with billions of people, does that come back to, is the issue that people don't want to hear it? Or is the issue that people don't think that they have the right, that what they have to say would matter enough? Is it fear that the other person won't hear you? Or is it fear that you don't want to take up their time. You don't want to distract them from your day, right? Again, so I think that's where the curious questions come in. And if we were, doing coaching and stuff together, we'd go down that rabbit hole. We'd say, ask more curious questions about what are your expectations of that moment? Why not tell your friend, today was really, really hard. Someone might not be able to hear you in that moment, and they may kind of, woo. And that's happened to a lot of us. You share, and the person that you're sharing with very clearly puts up a wall. And it's easy to take that personally, but that wall has to do with them. And they may go and think on that experience, right? Some people aren't ready to hear our truths because it resonates too much with something they're not ready to deal with. But I will say then, if it's really someone that means something to you, something that I've learned as I went through my experience and with this friend that I just lost, when we have those fractures, and we have those moments of dissonance and we don't connect, and we bring our stories to that moment and we say, oh, they think this of me. They didn't want to hear me. Oh, they think I'm this. They think I'm that. Remembering, I have no idea what they think. I have no idea what's going on in their head and what they're experiencing. And most of our responses are based on our own shame and our own experiences of the world. So they have so much more to do with who we are than with the person we're responding to. So much more, if not all. And if we really care about someone and we have those moments of rupture, reconnecting and giving them the grace to sit and listen and even say, hey, when I told you that I was going through something and you didn't seem ready to hear me, that made me feel a certain way. And I wanted to tell you because I don't think you wanted to make me feel that way. And it's an invitation to, one, clarify for you so that you can start to let go of that shame that you're carrying around, this ideas about what they think of you, but also an invitation for them. If this is someone you really care about, invitation to hear their story that they may be hiding, that they're carrying, that's growing like that weed behind the facade and growing in bigger and bigger because they don't think that they deserve someone time and energy to help them deal with this issue. So I think as you go along in self-development and understanding the importance of listening and the importance of autonomy and understanding the difference between self and other, I have found that to be really key in having clarity and peace, peace in your life, and the ability to focus on what is me, what is other. And when you can do that, that's when you can really make the choices that protect your peace and that help you lean into a healthier, happier life. And you stop getting pulled into other people's tornadoes. When you talked about the woman who said that her head was so full, it's almost like she's allowed herself to kind of get sucked into the cyclone, which is so easy to do early on. But you slowly learn how to back away from it and observe it. It's there. You can't control it. You can't make it go away. But you can learn how to stop stepping into it and participating in it.
When I was about 19, I read a really good book. And it was talking about how psychologists operate. And they were talking about an unconditional positive regard. And it's that state in psychology where the psychologist listens and has no judgment at all. And I think if all of us can learn to remove judgment and just listen, it would enable other people to talk openly. And the other thing that was interesting about the unconditional positive regard, the more that you just listen, the more likely that they're going to have that Freudian slip. And that thing that they really want to say eventually just pops out. And when it pops out, they have the aha moment for themselves. They've had the realization, and they often solve part of the problem. Not all of it, but they'll solve part of the problem and go, oh, wow, now that I say it, it's real, or it sounds crazy, or actually I should actually get some support. But the psychologist sits there and smiles and nods and holds the pen and takes notes. And I think we can learn from that. My daughter said to me the other day, she said, Dad, one of the boys at school is going on a holiday. And I said, that's really cool. Who's he going with? He's going with his mum. Okay, and is his dad going? He said, no, he doesn't have a dad. I said, okay, what does that mean? She said, well, his parents got separated at an earlier age. So my daughter's 12, this boy's 12. And she said, you know what, Dad, life's been pretty tough for him. And I said, well, what's tough? She said, well, his mum works at the night market and he has to go to the night market after school. So he's there from 6 o'clock at night to 12 o'clock in the morning, and he goes to the night market. And then when he comes home, he's got an abusive auntie who lives in the house. And then his grandfather, who was living in the house, has been put in jail because he was caught smoking marijuana, which is a very tough penalty here in the world. And so I've been taking Nikita to school every day. I've seen this boy every day. And I think to myself, wouldn't have it been nice to know earlier? To be able to put some additional time to say, g'day buddy, how you doing? Maybe do something a little bit nice. And so she had that story, but it wasn't really her story to share with others as well. So I know that she's becoming a good listener. And I think the reason why he divulged the information to her is because he knew that she wouldn't share it with others. And I think that's a concern for a lot of us as well. What if I do tell this person? Many years ago, I started to work at a hotel, and they used to call it the bloodbath. People would come in, they'd drink and they'd fight, and they'd leave with bloodied noses. But it was interesting just to watch the men provide therapy for the other men. They'd sit down, have a beer, talk about their problems at work, talk about their wife, talk about the family, and then say, see you later. And it was an opportunity for them to do an emotional release and for that information to never be brought back up ever again. And they left that weight at the bar. And it was quite interesting. You think, okay, for the price of a couple of beers, you got a really good therapy session. And you never have to talk about it ever again. And I think some of these skills we've got to teach. And it starts with silence. Not long ago, there was some statistics about the amount of time that parents actually spend speaking to their children. And they said that we spend more time brushing our teeth than we do speaking to our children. And that number of time in direct conversation with children was less than 2 minutes. So what I attempt to do and to train my children to listen is we go on long drives, uninterrupted, no devices, nothing on. We go for long walks. And the goal is just to get them talking. A little bit of walk and talk therapy. And I think that works wonders because as they grow up, when they have a challenge, they bring it with no shame. There's no shame that they've got a problem, that they've got an obstacle, that they've got a poor grade. There's no shame.
I love that.
That shame's very low in the frequencies. In the Map of Human Consciousness by David R. Hawkins, shame is the lowest frequency before death. If death is a frequency of 0 hertz, then shame is probably around about 20 or 25. And it's like an ego death.
Mm.
It's a heavy one.
Yeah, when you're stuck in shame, you're stuck in something outside of yourself and you're
Mm,
not you. Your
mm,
your your ideas about what the world thinks of you and how the world experiences you, but you don't actually know. You don't know because so
mm,
much of what you see is a reflection of everyone else's personal experience. And I didn't fully answer your question. When do we teach this to kids? We teach it to them from the time they're born.
mm.
Now, it's never too late if you found your family of origin was very shame heavy in the way that they interacted with one another, which is so often the case.
And a big problem around the world.
A huge problem. So you may have started out parenting, recycling some of the methods that you experienced. Don't waste time feeling shame about that.
Mm,
Learn from that. Take those lessons and acknowledge, oh, this actually doesn't feel good. Acknowledge those moments when you feel triggered by your child because you will,
mm.
and recognize that that's less about, again, our responses are so much about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's less about your child's behavior. It's more about how were you allowed to behave as a
Mm.
child? So if you feel your nervous system coming online into that fight or flight and you just want to end this moment, is it because a part of you, your inner child, feels unsafe for your child? Because if you, as a child, had behaved that way, that would have been unsafe.
Mm.
And so you start to regulate them and try to cut these moments off and make this behavior stop because it feels unsafe. But it's unsafe for a situation it's no longer here. That tiger isn't in the room anymore,
It's
right?
that
But we're carrying them.
it's that Victorian style of raising children. Children are to be
Mm.
seen and not heard. And that was like my mother's generation. I was
Mm.
saying to my kids the other day, they were sitting down at dinner and they were talking non-stop, which I think is wonderful. But at the same time, I needed some silence. And I said to them, I said, guys, I said, when I grew up, there was no talk at the table. You had to sit in silence and eat all of your food. And I said, you're so lucky growing up in this generation where you're allowed to talk. So if I'm not talking, that's not on you.
Yeah.
That's on me. I've been listening all day and I'm just going to sit here quietly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was really, really inspired by my experience with my youngest child to write my book, The Boy and His Brightly Colored Blocks, which is a book about emotional regulation. It's about the child learning emotional regulation as is modeled by his mother. But that modeling isn't just for the children that you're reading the book to. The children love the book because the boy's mischievous and he's really focused on his favorite thing in the world, which is his brightly colored blocks. And he has a lot of experiences with his toys that all kids can connect with. And he freely experiences his emotions when he loses a toy, right? He's allowed to have a big response when his brightly colored block table that's holding his toys and that's his space, when someone puts a cup on it and his response is one of outrage.
It's
You
not a
know
Lego,
you're
it's
not
not a block anymore, that's a
allowed.
castle.
He's like, oh gosh, yes, yes. He's his world is creating these block environments, right? And he's pulled away from them throughout the day, and that makes him feel a loss of control, and he has a big emotional response to that. Now, when we think about the style of parenting many of us experience, the response to that would be to mirror that dysregulation, that big emotion.
Mm.
And now everybody's in the same state, and it's going to just cascade from there until someone's so exhausted it gets to a point of no repair, and then we have to have a bigger repair later, right? It's like, oh, or maybe we don't repair, maybe we don't say sorry because that wasn't modeled for us either, right? Those moments, we've all had those moments in our life with one person or another. If we can learn to model, and that's what the mother in this book does, just holding space in those moments when our child or our partner is dysregulated,
Mm.
right? And not correcting them, but just connecting with them. Like, yeah, man, that's really frustrating that this block tower you've worked on for 2 weeks is now in pieces. But the thing is, because I saw you build that, I know you can build it even better next time. So that's the good news. I know you learned so much. And as frustrating as this is, I also know that this is an opportunity. And the fun thing with reading this book with kids and also with my son, who I wrote the book about, they take that last moment of the book where the boy is crying and he takes his sleeve and he wipes his tears with it and his nose with it. And he looks at his mom and he smiles and he said, "You know what, Mom, you're right. I can build it better." He rebuilds his blocks and then he on purpose knocks it down because he decides, you know what? It's okay. This moment I made a mistake here. I can just rebuild it. I can build it better. And the most amazing thing about reading the book with kids is they connect so deeply with that line. And anytime my son makes a mistake now, he'll be frustrated for a moment and then he smiles and he's like, "It's okay, Mom. I can do it better." And that's the beauty of books and children's literature and storytelling is by sharing our stories, we give others permission to see themselves in them and to borrow our resilience until they can build it up from them for themselves. And that's what we do with our children. We're not there to mirror every big emotion they have. We're there to model stability, resilience, love, being good listeners, as you have talked about, so that they can learn those skills because they didn't come programmed with those skills, but they do come with these big, beautiful brains that are able to soak up whatever it is that we share with them consistently, right? And that also includes when we make mistakes, instead of building that facade up and saying, "Oh, mistakes are bad. We're not allowed to make mistakes. I'm not going to tell you I made a mistake." Instead of saying, "Ooh, yep, I made that mistake. I'm so sorry." Because that models something so important to kids too, that it's okay to make mistakes. It's important to repair. It's okay to say you're sorry. And in that moment of connection, instead of correcting ourselves and the other person, that's where the magic really happens. And I just love being able to read the books with kids and to see them not only have those reactions for themselves, but something that is not uncommon in school visits is, so when you go to a school visit, you're already asking a tall order for these kids because they have to sit nicely, right? Victorian age. They have to sit nicely and quietly, even though neurodevelopmentally they are not prepared to do so, while I read this, 15-minute book to them. And we try to make it engaging and fun. And honestly, they listen so well. But especially before you start reading, there's often, there's some little issues. And often a caregiver is kind of like, "Oh, so yeah, sorry."
So your internet dropped out. I didn't think it was you. I thought it was me. but I was engaged by what you were saying.
I appreciate it, Daniel. And I love being able to share that story. And I think just as you've been talking about inviting people to be good listeners is so important. And it makes me think about not only listening to others, but listening to ourselves, which is really what we started at the top. And it's so incredibly important. When I think back to my time with my friend before he tragically died, and I think back to the last moments that we had as a family talking about him, because he was not only my friend, but he was also close with my kids. And just last week, just days before he died, we were in the car. I was with my children and we were driving. We live in a small town, small community, and we drove past his store. And I think that's what prompted in their mind thinking of him. They hadn't seen him for quite a while. And they both said, wow, we really miss this person. And I said, well, how about we just go into the store and say hi? And I think that felt a bit awkward or something to them. They kind of like, oh, mom, it's okay. But yeah, we really want to see them. And I said, okay, well, it's coming up to Halloween here in the States. And in our small town, we have a Saturday where all of the stores are open for trick or treating and kids can go from store to store. And my friend, as a store owner, he always loved to sit up in front, usually dress in something. I think he often was a vampire and would just have so much joy passing out the candy. And I thought, well, what an easy way for us to just stop by and say hi and reconnect. You miss him. I miss him. He's been going through a lot. And we want to show our support and reconnect with him. And all week it was on my mind. Something kept telling me to stop into the store. It was a really busy week. We had, my daughter had theater practice almost every day after school. And we also had parent teacher conferences for both kids, which lasted essentially all night. So it didn't happen. We didn't stop by the store. And it just kept on coming to my mind. Gosh, I really want to stop by. Oh, and I had all these excuses why, okay, I'll do it next week. And then it was this Monday when I had a meeting nearby and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to stop by the store because I had this idea because he's been going through really challenging things in his life that were so similar to what I was going through. And he'd reached out for help, but he was really struggling with receiving help. And from my experience, learning how to escape that noise, like you were talking about, and lean into purpose and your story and what it is that you want to do in the world, I thought he was an expert in Hemingway. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go pitch this to him in the store. I was so excited. I was like, okay, we're going to film a podcast episode in his beautiful store. He has it decorated with all this amazing local artistry artwork that he has on display for sale. And he's so proud of the store he's built. And yes, he's going through really challenging things in his life and he's lost a lot, but look at what he has, right? We're going to really focus on showcasing everything that has gone well, that he's worked so hard for. And we're going to talk about what's coming next. We're going to try to help him see everything he's done and everything he will do. And this is literally, how when you plan something big as a creative person, you can see it in your head before you do it. I had this beautiful memory of something that hadn't happened yet because I was so excited to do this with my friend. And then I looked online to check something before I went. And I saw that the day before it had been announced that he'd died by suicide. And one was just in complete shock. And as I'm processing it, and again, I'm still processing it. It's still so fresh. And there's nothing that can bring him back. But it's just such a reminder to me to listen to myself. If you want to do that nice thing for a friend, do it. If when you ask someone, "How you doing, mate? Having a good day?" and they pause, say, "No, really, how are you doing?" Because it matters so much. And that one statement can be the difference. And I'm trying not to live with guilt for not listening to myself and reaching out in those days. It's not my fault. It's not anybody's fault. It's not his fault what happened. But it does really painfully remind me of the power that we have through connection. I think it's the biggest power that we have. So lean into that, because it has more power than any checklist any doctor has asking about mental health. So many times when we ask those questions, we don't get the real answer the first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. Maybe then we'll eventually get the correct answer. And then, as you said, then we often don't even know what to do with that answer. We don't know how to support someone. But the people in your everyday life that you see on the street or that are closer to you in your life, you have so much power in making a positive influence on them just by listening, just by being there. So listen to your gut when you feel that there's, as you talked about, these energies that we have, when you feel a different energy, and don't push away from it because you wish it wasn't there, but just listen and lean into it.
And it is energetic. We feel things that we might not be able to consciously explain, but it doesn't mean that it's not there. That feeling of guilt, what's really interesting in the work of David Hawkins, his theory is that all of us have receptor genes. Like Bruce Lipton talks about the same thing in epigenetics. We have receptor genes. And we go through periods of life where we start to receive a message. And some of those messages can be quite dark. It's like a business owner. You start a business and you've never been stressed about payroll. You start a business, never in your past history you've been worried about employment. But now you start to pick up this external chatter. And what David Hawkins and Bruce Lipton both say is that all the thoughts of every other business owner are getting broadcast around the world. And when you enter that particular situation and you take on that role to become a business owner, you now start to download all this new information. And it can be very overwhelming. And a lot of people, because they don't communicate what's happening, is they think they're the only person in the world going through this. You are not the only person who's worried about payroll this week. You are not the only person on this planet worried about where your next sale's going to come from. You're not the only business owner on the planet who's worried about having a difficult conversation. It comes with the territory. And when you're at that same level of consciousness, you start to pick up that new frequency. It's like somebody who's in a marriage. Do you think you're the only man on this planet who's ever thought that his wife might be cheating on him? Do you think you're the only woman on the planet who's had that thought? No, but I think that's the thing with vanity. We're so vain that we think we're the only person going through it. Or if it's happening to me, it's got to be worse than everybody else. But we're absorbing so much. It's like frequency. If you walk into a home where there's domestic violence and you walk in that front door, you pick up the vibe. You know it's not a good time to be home. Nothing's been said, nothing's been seen. You just pick up on the vibe. And it's that gut instinct, isn't it? We've got to learn to listen to that. But we're so detached from it. And we've got to learn to listen to those different frequencies that are out there. I had a situation years ago my arm was hurting. And I was talking to a girlfriend. I said, I got to go. My arm's hurting. She says, what's wrong? I said, I don't know. And I rang my uncle and I said, you wouldn't believe it. I said, I feel like my arm has been broken.
Mm.
And he said, what time? And I said, 2:00. And he said, then what? And I said, then I felt like this hand had been broken and my finger had been snapped back. And he said, when was that? And I said, at the same time. And he said, okay, come to the office and we'll have a conversation. So I felt crazy for saying it, but at least this person listened without judgment. I got to the office and he said, just take me back through what you said to me. I said, I felt that my arm had been broken. I felt that my finger had been snapped back. And he said, and what time did you say? And I said, 2:00. And he said, well, at exactly 2:00, your cousins had a car accident. One of them broke their arm, and the other one, because of the impact, put their hand through the steering wheel and snapped the finger back here. Now, I'd been feeling that and I couldn't explain it, but at least when I shared it, nobody judged me for it. And I thought to myself, that's interesting. I should listen to my intuition more often. And that was a turning point, and I started to. And if we have friends, when things don't seem right and we get that feeling, challenge it and challenge them. I heard it many moons ago. Raw is real. Just hit me with it. Just tell me how it is. Don't sugarcoat it. No bullshit.
Yeah.
Just tell me what's happening. I had lived with a young man and we were roommates and something was off. And I didn't like the vibe. I didn't see him. I didn't hear him. And I was about to fly from Dubai to Kuala Lumpur. And one of the laws in Dubai at that stage when we lived there was that if somebody attempted suicide, they would be jailed for that. Not cared for, but jailed for it. And so I was a part of the Emirates Airline Critical Incident Stress Response Team and the peer support group. And I spoke to him through his door on the way out and I said, Oi. I said, if you're planning to kill yourself whilst I'm gone, think twice. I said, because if I come home and there's a dead body here, I'm getting put into jail. And so I flew to Kuala Lumpur and I came back and I was right. And the use of guilt, it was a positive use of guilt. He said to me, you know what? He said, I've been planning this for weeks. I've got the drugs there ready to go. I've got whatever else I'm going to use and I was going to do it. He said, but then I thought of you getting in trouble. And it was just that I called it out. And then that night we sat down and we had a conversation. We got him the help that he needed and his family come and took him home. And there was resolution. But for weeks on end, he was trapped in his own thinking, in his own end of the world scenarios. And it wasn't until somebody said, you know, hey, I'll be in prison, that he actually popped out of his head for a moment and come back to reality. But
The story he was telling himself was probably that the world would be better without him. But you very frankly and rawly said, no, the world's not going to be better without you. And here's a tangible reason why. And, you know, maybe it may come across as harsh, but he needed something to shock him out of that. And you knew him. So you knew likely what would be, at least have a chance of resonating with him. And I'm just so grateful that you took that chance, because I think so many people would keep their head down in that situation and come up with all sorts of excuses.
It's a big problem. We shouldn't ignore it. Here in Taiwan, self-harm attempts are 11 times greater than suicide attempts. The biggest cause of death for students here in Taiwan right now is self-harm followed by suicide. And it's to do with grades. I dropped out of school at age 17 and I live a very normal life. I got friends and family who did the first year of school and dropped out, and they're self-made millionaires. It's not the be-all and end-all. For men, globally right now, under 50, the biggest cause of death is suicide. And we should be calling it out. Not to shame them, but to give them a bit of a shake-up and say, you know what, you're not the only one. And there are people out there who can help you. There's so much. One of the things that helped me when I was younger, I was diagnosed with linear sequential learning disability. So I was learning disabled. So I was told. But then I learned later on it's impossible not to learn. we absorb everything through modelling, as you mentioned before. And so at school, for me, the teachers didn't know my learning style, and they only had one teaching style. So for me, it was very difficult. And I ended up going to a special part of the school, and it was called the Space Lab. And in the Space Lab, there was some unusual characters there. But the name was Space Lab, and I'm thinking maybe I'm super smart. Maybe I'm going to be an astronaut. But it was just for the kids who are off the planet. And so I was in this Space Lab for years, and there was a lot of embarrassment. There was a lot of shame in it. And even for me, the thought had crossed my mind, maybe it would be better off if I wasn't here. Maybe it would be better off and I gave somebody else this space. And you entertain these thoughts for a while, and after a while they seem a little bit crazy. So I have been through that experience, but there was some other things that were running a little bit deeper at that stage. My spine was twisted. I learned that the cranial plates in my head weren't formed properly, so I was putting a lot of pressure on the left and right hemisphere of the brain. I was visually impaired, and I was tone deaf. So there were so many things in the pot at that stage. And one of the things that my parents tried was music as medicine. And I remember being trained to play classical guitar, flamenco style. And here I am trying to play this guitar and I'm tone deaf. Here I am trying to read sheet music and my eyes are going in all these different directions and the brain's not processing the information. But what I did find was a lot of calm in the music. And for many years, maybe 4 or 5 years, there was a lot of music as medicine. I know for you, you've got a deep history in both music and medicine. How can people de-stress with music?
I love how you shared the person that you'd worked with years ago who was having that noise in their head. And so they distracted their nervous system. We think about mind and psychology, but it's your nervous system. They distracted it with music because we can't multitask. We pay attention to one thing at a time. So she was feeling like she was in this room full of all of these really awful voices that she had kind of caged up and bottled up in her head. And instead, she decided, I'm going to stop listening to these voices. I can't start with just telling them, no, you stop, you stop, you stop. Like, I'm not there yet, but I can distract my brain, right? And at first, and I've been there too, at first, if she forgot her headphones when she went to the store, that might have led to a panic attack, right? Because she didn't have the internal regulation skills yet to do that on her own. She needed that musical distraction. We can use music to get us through such challenging times. And so I think when we're in the throes of things, just listening to other people's music and allowing it to sit beside us and share that experience with us can be so helpful. Don't be afraid to change the playlist every week or two because you're growing and evolving. You're in a different place with this emotion. The song that got you through last week may be kind of holding you back this week. Remove that from the playlist if you're feeling, that's not resonating with me. Okay, what resonates this week? And allow your playlist to evolve. And that can be have a really therapeutic effect on you. And then start to play an instrument. Play around. And actually my book that is the follow-up to The Boy and His Brightly Colored Blocks, The Boy and His Electric Guitar, is the boy's journey as he's getting older. He still has big emotions. He's still learning how to navigate the world, but in different ways. And one thing his family does is music. His mom plays instruments, his sister plays instruments. She's older, so she's in lessons. And he's going through this process of trying different instruments. And mom is allowing him to try the trumpet, to play it loudly and proudly and wrongly, and then to move on from that and try the piano and try the drums and try all of these things until he can find the instrument that when he plays that, it unlocks something in him. And it teaches him not only to love the process, but to accept the mistakes he makes along the way and see them as ways that he learns. And when we do things like learn an instrument or write a book or take a class, and we really, really, really accept that learning and making mistakes, failure is a part of the process of learning this new skill and of taking that time to really look back at the end of that class or at the end of I started playing guitar on December 1st of this year. And then the next year, when I look back, wow, what an incredible growth they've had. Instead of focusing on all the times where I didn't know how to tune the guitar back then, or I didn't know how to play that chord, and my hand didn't, as you talked about the physical aspects of it, my hand didn't bend that way, or maybe the size was a challenge for me to play this instrument, whatever it was. Learning instead of focusing on the challenge and the failure, but learning to be really proud of how you overcame those challenges is transformative. So do the new thing, take on the new hobby, and get those data points that showed how you can navigate challenges. And you'll be shocked how learning a new musical instrument, for example, because music is so key to tapping into parts of our brain that are usually behind the facade under lock and key. We're not sharing with others. Tapping into that and then allowing ourselves to grow beyond the state that we think we're trapped in now, allowing us to grow. And I want to even focus on something as tangible as the way you speak. The way you speak has been touched by your love of music and how engaging with playing music affected you. It's very clear in the tonality of how you speak, the rhythm of how you speak. It is very musical. You treat your voice as an instrument. And likely that is because, whether consciously or unconsciously, you recognize the power of speaking with musicality, of using your voice as an instrument to communicate better. You tapped into that power of music, even the way you speak. And there's so many ways, so many little things we can do as we build up ourselves and we really lean into who we are and lean into what we can become. I want to become a speaker. Okay, what can I do to become a speaker? We get so focused on my story's not good enough. When you listen to the best speakers of all time, they've got a good story, but more than anything, they're really great communicators. So maybe you can focus on having more musicality in your voice or having a certain body posture, whatever it is that you can focus on that resonates with you to get you one step closer to your goal of speaking or of playing that instrument a year from now, right? Don't set the goal for tomorrow because you can't meet that goal. Set an attainable goal. And then prove to yourself and to your nervous system every day through your dedication and doing those small tasks that you can do great things and that you can have a life that is the story you want to tell. And so I appreciate what you're doing here. You're bringing doctors on, but you're treating them as full people. And that allows people who are listening who may come to this episode to hear a doctor speak, but then they realize they're hearing a fellow human speak. And that can have great effects on how they interact with healthcare professionals in the future. This is just another human. This isn't an authority figure or, a scientist. This is another human that has dedicated their life to helping me. And I'm going to see them as such. And I'm going to get out of my head. I'm not going to be nervous to go see the doctor. And I'm going to go there, show up as me, and get what I need. Because that's why they came to work today, to help me. And I matter and I deserve to have the health care that I need. And I'm going to show up as myself so that that can actually happen. So I think what you're doing is so powerful. And I really appreciate you inviting me to be a part of it.
It's my pleasure. Where can our guests learn more about the work that you do or the upcoming books that you're going to release?
Absolutely. We've got a lot coming out in 2026, so please follow along. My website is drshaferstedranova.com. And if you look up Talks with Dr. Shafer on, if you Google that, look at it in any browser, I apologize already. You're going to be inundated with things. Pick the thing that resonates with you and follow along. I'd love to have you along as I tell my story and as I'm sharing the stories of really inspiring people on my podcast, Talks with Dr. Shafer.
Dr. Shafer, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. This has been such a pleasure.